Hackers have been in Rust since the first day it was released to the public. The flying, aimbotting, and wall hacks are nothing new to Rust. In the past, it was very obvious who was doing it. Players would spin in circles, shooting in random directions, and look through walls to tell what yummy, delicious loot you had in your boxes. It's nothing new to Rust. My friend Toasty here gets easily scared by things as simple as rustling bushes. But knowing Rust's past history with all types of cheaters, why do they still dominate today? Why does Rust, and honestly, every other game, seem to have a problem with this? This is a letter to the developers of Rust, an homage to OG Rust players, and hopefully, a compromise between new and old survivors of the wasteland. Rust came out in 2013 with graphics that were made with a color palette of brown, green, and... oh. yeah, just brown and green. Cheaters were everywhere back then. If you made it to 200 hours, you were guaranteed to find at least a couple of them. They would fly in the air and gun you down with perfect precision and accuracy. It was so obvious. Why they didn't bother hiding it beats me, but one thing's for sure, you didn't want them finding your base. Some cheaters were using hacks that could let them see through walls and into your boxes. They could see every single item that you had stored in your base. If they found your place of residence, they would camp outside your base until you opened the door and killed you within seconds. Toasty, can you show our guests the footage we found of the legacy times? Thanks, Toasty. Every server back then probably saw at least one cheater. They were infamous in the community so much that when a cheater was caught, their name was talked about across all the servers within days. Admins would attempt to ban them before they ever joined their server, as to prevent their Elephant Stampede level rampage through the community and public servers. In the earliest days of Rust, there was no anti-cheat or official server admins, so pure hacking was unpunished and rampant. Here's my review of the game from way back then. As you can see, I was very unhappy about the lack of any official server administration and anti-cheat software. For a couple of months after my initial review, I actually took a break from the wasteland. I'm not sure how long it would take me to come back, but I did after Facepunch had announced they would be monitoring servers for potential cheaters and ban them personally. It would only be a couple years later when they would implement easy anti-cheat, significantly reducing the amount of hackers that were outright breaking the game. No more flying players, no more wall hacks, no more spin botters. All seemed to be good in the wasteland. Or was it? You see, Rust developers, Facepunch, had always tried to get rid of those that would seek to gain an unfair advantage in their game. But the problem doesn't seem to be fixed. The embers of a burning world are still hot and smoking, but who is holding the smoking gun? More importantly, why are these players attempting to cheat the system? I mean, it's just a video game, right? Rust has always been known as one of the hardest survival games to ever exist. The OG players from my time know exactly what I'm saying when I say Rust became a lifestyle. Constant hours of hitting trees and sulfur ore for the big blowout raid was a common day in the wasteland back then. Prepping yourself for the moment your friends would message you to get on because you were getting raided was always something players of this game were familiar with. Sometimes, you wouldn't even go to sleep on time just because you wanted to be sure that everything you worked for was safe. But the big thing that every Rust player hates, the one thing that really sets them apart from other gaming communities, is the disdain of losing to cheaters. You see, in Rust, losing doesn't just mean you take an L and move on. No. In Rust, losing means you lost everything. Dying meant you lost your items, getting raided meant you lost your home, and worst of all, getting your sleeping bag broken meant you were done. And Toasty and I both believe that this is the first of the biggest reasons for the endless existence of cheaters in Rust. Nobody wants to start from zero over and over again. Nobody wants to lose a day's worth of work. So, how do you prevent that? You cheat. You make sure that every time you leave your base, you know that you'll be able to kill another player before they kill you. You give yourself the ability to do things other players can't. Because Rust had always been a hardcore game, losing really felt bad. And if you weren't putting enough time into the game, you were falling behind. So, to prevent the loss of that time, a lot of players decided that they were going to cheat to do it. Some of the common cheats that have been plaguing Rust are ESP, which is wall hacks, aimbot, flying, and recoil scripting. I'll get to that last one in a bit. But Rust, like other first-person shooter games, has an anti-cheat built in currently. It's called Easy Anti-Cheat, and it prevents players from using blatant hacks like flying. Anything that alters the memory state or attempts to change the game files is usually detectable by EAC. So, why does it still exist today, and who's doing it? I believe that cheaters will always exist in some form. Most games can be exploited in one way or another with some piece of hardware or software, and Rust is no exception even with EAC. Now, EAC itself is not a very strong anti-cheat. Its access to a PC's files is not as exceptional as something like Vanguard from Riot Games. But even so, would it make a difference? You see, hacking has gotten a lot more complex over Rust's lifespan. Today, hackers are using a method known as DMA or direct memory access hacking. This is usually done with external hardware attached to the user's main PC and allows the reading and writing of the game's memory to be done on a separate computer and overlaid onto the monitor or injected into the main PC. This is practically undetectable by most anti-cheats that don't have kernel level access. If a player wanted to, they could go months or maybe even years without being detected in Rust. As long as this player had the know-how and the money to do it, they could. So you might be thinking, why are they cheating, Sorbet? Well, like I said, Rust is a very punishing game. It's as hardcore gets when it comes to games, and some players will attempt to win at all costs. Whether it's to impress an online audience or simply win for the sake of winning, these players will always exist. But there seems to be a new type of cheater about, and that's the revenge cheater. This type of cheater is someone who's played Rust for hundreds or even thousands of hours and is unhappy with the state of Rust currently. They don't like the direction Facepunch has taken the game, and thus they cheat to maintain an edge in the game or to spite Facepunch for their decisions. And to be honest, if it hadn't been for these talks that Toasty and I do for you, I'd probably be one of these cheaters. Because I've played Rust for nearly a decade, and I too disagree with some of the choices that the leadership has permitted into the wasteland. You might be thinking, Sorbet, there's no way you'd do such a thing. Well, if it hadn't been for you all coming and joining us for our talks, I'd probably be out there right now stirring up trouble. But I wanted to do something greater for this community than just destroy it. I wanted to see if Toasty and I could really make a change and do something good with all of this negativity. So, thank you to all of the guests who come in and leave notes for Toasty and I to read. Whether you like us or not, we do this because we love the Wasteland, we love this game, and we love you all too. Well, the respectful ones at least. Rust would just be a set of empty islands if it weren't for you all inhabiting them. Now, I mentioned something earlier about a certain type of cheater. Someone who uses scripts. Scripts, for our unknowing guests, are basically pieces of software that are given automated instructions to do something, usually on a mouse or keyboard. They perform a certain set of actions based on a specific input. In Rust, a niche community of cheaters have used scripts to control their mouse in order to achieve perfect aim. This was mostly done in the prime era of Rust, or at least that's what people say, where guns had a learnable recoil pattern. These cheaters used these scripts so they wouldn't have to learn the recoil and could just program their mouse to perform the counteraction of the recoil for them. This can even go as far as Rust on console, where players are also attempting to use a mouse and keyboard. In my opinion, this form of cheating is much more controllable by allowing a more invasive anti-cheat to perform checks on these scripts, as they typically rely on the hardware interacting with a piece of software that is already attached to the user's main PC. I could be wrong, but I think Facepunch could develop their own kernel level anti-cheat to solve this issue. If you ask a cheater why they cheat, if you look at the many documentaries of cheating in other games, you will find a commonality in most of them, and that's that the cheater wants to feel like they have control. If a player doesn't feel like they have control, they will find a way to take it, or you can give them a choice to take control. You see, recoil patterns is one way to do it by allowing someone to have full control over their aim. The way Rust is now doesn't really incentivize players to have much control because of the aim cone. It's partial, but not complete, which is why I believe there is more cheating today than in Rust Prime or even in Legacy. I know what some of you might be thinking, well damn Sorbet, you really talk about this recoil stuff a lot, don't ya? You must be one of those aim nerds that sank hundreds of hours into learning something so pointless. And to this I say, yes, suck it. I was amazing at it and it was fun, okay? If you didn't like it, well, sucks to suck, doesn't it? But despite that fact, Recoil did at least offer the option for some players who had the time and willpower, of course, to learn a skill that would give you a legal edge in play. Think about this. Competition gives players a true alternative choice to cheating. Imagine If Valorant had no difference in characters, the only true advantage in 1v1s would be cheating. This is what it looks like to lose because of aim cone. I don't think scripting was as bad as people say. Learning Rust Recoil was considered fun for the majority of players at that time because it was a unique feature that didn't exist in a lot of other FPS games. Scripting inherently ruined that unique aspect of Rust that people wanted to play the game for. Nobody talks about aim cone in that way. The reason why Rust PvP popped off on social media was because of the recoil. If you were gonna cheat in Rust, you might as well go big with hacks versus scripting, because both were equally bannable and easily detectable by EAC and Facepunch's own efforts in banning mouse script users. Now, I'm not advocating that Rust should become a game that is solely based on esports, but it should align with its values of being a competitive and hardcore survival game, which the recoil system did lean towards. I'll explain the differences between hardcore and competitive games in the future. Another thing that hasn't really helped the cheating epidemic is that Facepunch has been slow to deliver the proper updates that would dissuade players from ever cheating in the first place. Instead, they've been focused on making mostly unnecessary changes to the game without really consulting their core players. Core, not necessarily meaning the majority, but the ones who would play their game for years and advocate for it. Toasty and I want to thank you guys for leaving so many notes for us to read. There's one here in particular that I want to look at. This was in response to our chit-chat about the World Update 2.0. This survivor wrote, "Rust is dead. We are playing a game that looks like Rust, but is not Rust. I understand that this is profitable for the devs, and I don't blame them. All I ask is for a hardcore Rust edition just like it was before the Recoil update." Thank you for the note. I know a lot of us are also in the same boat with the survivor. Rust is definitely unrecognizable in some ways. Although we hoped for better, sadly, Rust is just not what it once was, but there still is light at the end of the tunnel. Facepunch has the ability to create tailored experiences by implementing the tools necessary for server owners to choose how their players experience the wasteland on their server. Facepunch could also allow modders to create unique mods that change the fundamental properties of the game so that we can all find what we are looking for out here in the wasteland. All it will take is our voices being heard on social media. Toasty and I will be doing some chit-chats about how we can specifically improve Rust, so if that's something you guys are interested in, make sure to leave a note for us to read, with your specific ideas or unique gameplay features. Toasty and I want to thank you for being a guest in our cabin. You might have noticed that I sound a little different. I've been working on a new voice box for my suit, and it seems to be working just fine. All it took was one tech trash and one high-quality metal. Would you believe that, Toasty? Oh, and also, it took Facepunch another 3 months of biome updates, but that's besides the point. The wasteland will always face cheaters on some level, but I think with a strong anti-cheat, consistent official server admins, and the proper incentives to allow players to have control and autonomy over their experiences, the wasteland can be mostly free of cheating. Stay safe out there, and stay frosty.